All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to give everyone a few minutes here, but I see some of you have joined already. So if you can, please feel free to go ahead and fill out the pre-webinar polling questions that we have that just popped up on your screen. There are 3 questions, so you will have to scroll down a bit to answer that last one. And again, for those of you just joining, thanks for joining our webinar today. We have 3:29 right now, so we'll give it another minute or 2 to let some people filter in here. And while we're waiting, there are just 3 pre-webinar polling questions for you to go ahead and fill out, and we'll get started shortly. And forgive me if you can hear a dog barking in the background. All right, well, I have 3:30 on my clock here. So we can go ahead and close out the pre-webinar polling questions. Thank you. So welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Hydration Tactics to Fuel High School Athletes. Thanks so much for joining us today to learn more about this really important topic as many students begin to return to sports, even if it's just for practice and training. My name is Liz Jelkowitz, and I'm a registered dietitian with the American Dairy Association Northeast. I also help to lead up our sports nutrition advisory panel. And for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization, we're a nonprofit company representing over 10,000 dairy farm families in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC. Next slide. So through our Refuel with Chocolate Milk program, we collaborate with a variety of partners in both the private and public sector within our territory, including our high school athletic associations. American Dairy's Refuel with Chocolate Milk program helps to sponsor high school athletics within our region, which helps provide funding for championship events as well as nutrition education for both coaches and student athletes. I also want to mention on this slide that during this webinar, actually at the end of this webinar, we are 3 lucky attendees will be selected at random to win a really exciting prize. So make sure you stay on for the whole webinar. It's a Refuel with Chocolate Milk weight room cooler and $500 to stock it with chocolate milk. So you must stay on for the entire presentation to be eligible for this prize. Good luck, everybody. Next slide. So on this slide here, you'll see our 2020 Sports Nutrition Advisory Panel here at American Dairy, which I help to manage. And one of the main jobs of these panelists is to create relevant and timely content for our high school coaches and student athletes throughout the year. Next slide. And I wanted to take a quick moment to share our website, americandairy.com. And on our website, there are tons of free resources for you to access. And they range from sports nutrition content, which you'll see on the left side there of your screen, as well as general dairy nutrition information on milk, yogurt, and cheese as well. So lots of great content that you can share with both parents and student athletes. Next slide. And then lastly here, these are our social media platforms and handles, and we'd love for you to follow us if you don't already do so. We share a lot of great content that you can then turn around to your student athletes, again, or parents. A lot of great nutrition content for sports as well. All right, so on this slide, I'm excited to introduce to you our speaker for the day. Molly Morgan is a registered dietitian, author, and owner of Creative Nutrition Solutions. She has extensive experience in the area of sports nutrition and corporate wellness, including working with Fortune 500 companies, national brands, and professional sports teams. Molly worked with the Ottawa Senators and Belleville Senators, affiliated with the National Hockey League and American Hockey League, as their nutrition consultant for 14 seasons, where she created and developed custom nutrition plans for players along with interactive workshops. Additionally, she works with the Binghamton University Division I men's basketball team on nutrition plans and delivers custom workshops. Molly has been a blogger for mensfitness.com, routinely works with the media, and has authored 3 books. Molly completed her degree in clinical dietetics at the State University of Buffalo and is a board-certified sports specialist dietitian. So without further ado, please help me welcome Molly Morgan. Take it away, Molly.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you all joining in. I know life is busy, especially with all this back to school and virtual school and everything we're all trying to navigate. So thanks for taking the time. And this topic we're covering today, hydration, is such an important topic. So we'll be covering, the first thing is understanding the importance of proper hydration for high school athletes and the impact that hydration can have on performance. We'll go through some of the consequences of dehydration, and then we'll really focus on the current hydration recommendations for high school athletes, including guidelines for before, during, and after practice. And then I'll be sure to touch on as well to help you understand when and why athletes might benefit from a sports drink over water. But with that said, you know, these sessions are for all of you, and there will be time for questions at the end. So please, as I go, if something comes up, you can, in the chat box, go ahead and input your chat, and the folks from America Dairies Northeast will certainly be keeping an eye on those, and we'll have time at the end. Can advance to the next slide.
All right, everyone. So we have our first polling question here for you. You could take a minute to, it's actually a 2-part question. So if you could take a moment and fill that out. The first question is, do you find your student athletes bring water drinks with them to workouts and practices? And the second part is, why is hydration important for student athletes?
I'm really interested to hear these answers too.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Oh, yay.
All right.
So it's looking like most of you, a majority on the call, are finding that athletes are bringing water or drinks with them to practice. And definitely seeing a combination of, yes, on and off the field as far as hydration is important for athletes. Great.
Next slide.
Next slide. All right, so let's talk about why hydration matters for athletes. And I'll tell you a quick little story. So Elizabeth told you all I've worked extensively with pro hockey players, and I'll share with you just one case example. We had an athlete who was playing in the minor leagues. He was losing about 5 to 6 pounds of fluid per game from sweat, primarily from sweat. And when we were reviewing that, and we talked about, you know, if you can change your hydration intake in the game, up how much you're taking in and some other strategies to reduce your water loss, it can definitely help your performance. And it was like a light bulb kind of went off in his brain. He's like, okay, well, I get so into the game, you know, sometimes I just forget to drink, or I don't feel thirsty, so I don't drink. And he really focused on his hydration, and that was the last season he played in the minor leagues his whole entire career. And not to say that hydration is the only thing that took him to the NHL, but I share that example a lot with athletes when I'm talking with them, and it's something you can share with your athletes, because when athletes play at such a high level, those little changes, something as little as drinking more, can make a big difference as it relates to performance. So there are definite benefits as far as hydration and performance, both on and off the field. And just a quick little fact about the off the field perspective, because, you know, with so many sports on pause right now, I thought it would be important to kind of touch on that a little bit. But the brain is about 75% water by mass. And there's a lot of research continuing to come out that even mild dehydration, so just being mildly underhydrated, when they look at tasks that require complex processing, even something like a crossword puzzle or something, if your brain is not as hydrated as it should be, even, you know, those tasks that we're trying to do, whether it's in our own jobs or for students in the classroom, can be compromised. So, you know, I think that's always important too when we're talking about fueling the body, especially for youth athletes, is that while, of course, what happens on the field or, you know, in their performance as an athlete's important, certainly what's happening in the classroom is also arguably as important, if not more important. So there is a connection as well to the classroom, and I think that's important for you all to understand. Okay, we'll hop to the next slide. So the amazing thing about water is that our bodies are hardwired that we cannot survive without water. And depending on a couple different factors, but the body is over half of our bodies are water. And basically everything that happens in our body, from muscle contractions as it relates to performance, for example, or as I was just sharing with you, the examples of the brain and how we're able to do complex tasks, happens and requires water. So just it's important, I think, for us to remember that, you know, that's really the foundation of a lot of what happens in our bodies. Next slide. So because water makes up such a large portion of our body, it's not something that we can kind of turn on and turn off focusing on. It is a daily grind, so to speak, and a daily hydration routine absolutely matters. And, you know, a lot of times when I talk to athletes, the first question they will have is, well, what should I do on game day? And while certainly what they do on game day is important, it's very important that, especially as it relates to hydration, is that it's not just a thing you think about on game day. It's a daily hydration routine so that you're showing up to practices hydrated, you're rehydrating your body, and then ultimately, of course, also showing up to your games hydrated as well. But it does take effort before, during, and after activities, and I will cover those guidelines with you. And hydration is definitely something that is important to be safe and successful on the field, and then, of course, off the field as well. Next slide. So why worry? The interesting thing, I shared with you that example of, you know, kind of a little case study example of a player that I worked with many years ago. But why worry is that playing underhydrated can negatively impact sports performance. So, you know, if I'm talking to a team about a bunch of different topics, when I get to the hydration piece, I always tell the athletes is, listen, if you take nothing else away from this workshop, hydration is what I really want you to listen to, because it's all important for sure. But by the time you're thirsty, you're already 1% underhydrated. And by the time you're just 2% underhydrated, performance really starts to decrease even more. And certainly, you know, so on down the road, 3% on where you are, you know, clinically become dehydrated, but just underhydrated. And I think that's important because sometimes we focus on the word dehydrated. But again, by the time you're thirsty, you're already 1% underhydrated, which means you've lost 1% of your body weight in water. So, you know, for a 150-pound athlete, that's only 1.5 pounds of fluid loss. It can happen really quick. and it can result in decreases in performance. Again, especially in sports where there's that eye-hand coordination component, like I have a softball photo on the screen, but certainly any sport to do with passing, such as hockey, lacrosse, football, you know, many sports, of course, are impacted. Okay. So again, just 1 to 2% fluid loss can negatively impact performance. And when we start to use the word dehydrated, technically that is when there's 3% or more fluid loss. And that's where you get into the risky zone, if you will, for heat-related illness. So what I do always try to encourage athletes to do is set up that daily routine, which we will again go over those guidelines in a minute, but then start to really learn to listen to their body, because when they start to learn, okay, by the time I'm thirsty, I'm already 1% underhydrated, it can help them, you know, keep up with fluid loss a little bit better versus kind of always being reactive, if you will. Next. So daily fluid intake is important. We want to focus on fluids before, during, and after. And we also want to teach our athletes how to monitor their fluid status and their hydration status. And I'll tell you a funny quick story. My husband and I have 2 little boys, and I guess it's the consequence of growing up with a sports dietitian as a mom, but I'll never forget our oldest son was maybe about 3 at the time, and he was laying in bed and he didn't want to go to bed. And I went in to check on him again. He goes, "But Mom, I went to the bathroom and my pee was dark color. I am very dehydrated." And I share that example as just kind of a funny story, but you can teach athletes to monitor their hydration status and really start to learn what to look for so they can help start to evaluate their hydration better on a day-to-day basis. So we'll go to the next slide. So when I say daily focus on hydration, what exactly do I mean? There's a picture of a water bottle on the screen for a very specific purpose. And one of the things I encourage teams to do, and it could be the captain of your team if you have one, or it could be somebody you assign as the hydration captain, so to speak. And I encourage, if it's allowed at school, for athletes to carry a water bottle around with them. And let's face it, if we don't have water by our sides, we're not going to be sipping it throughout the day, which is the goal. We want to sip water all throughout our day to keep our bodies hydrated. And with that said, if you do have water by your side right now, I would encourage you to take a quick little hydration break yourself and grab a sip of fluid. So daily focus on hydration, again, carry that water bottle with you, maybe assign a hydration captain, if you will, to remind teammates to have that water bottle with them. And I'll cover some other daily hydration tips shortly. But the schedule, if you will, that are guidelines for high school athletes to follow is before activity or practice or game, contest, workout session, whatever, 2 hours before, you want to have 16 ounces of water. And that's, you know, an average size water bottle you would pick up at like a convenience store. Then before, you want to top off your fluid stores about 15 minutes before with 8 to 16 fluid ounces of water again. And that number varies based on individual tolerance, and a lot of other factors can vary into that as well. But, you know, I've had athletes, and I know myself, if I drink a full 16 ounces of fluid before I go out for a run, that's not going to feel so great for me. But I know 8 ounces, you know, is something I can tolerate. So there are individual differences as far as what people can tolerate as to how much to have before, but 8 to 16 is the reference range. And then during activity, 4 to 8 ounces of water every 15 to 20 minutes. And as a coach, as you're working on your practice plans, if you can look at your routine of your practice and every 20 minutes or so, make sure you're giving your athletes an opportunity to pause and get a couple sips of water. Each gulp of water, if you will, is about 1 fluid ounce. So if they can, take a quick break, grab a couple gulps of water to help their body stay hydrated is a really important guideline to try and follow. And then after, if your athletes have the ability to check their weight before and after activities, it is the guideline to replenish with 24 fluid ounces. And this is where other beverages can come in as well, like chocolate milk is a perfect refueling beverage, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. Can you go to the next slide? So when we talk again about daily hydration, I mentioned, sipping mostly water throughout the day. But unfortunately, we know that most teens, and it's not just teens, but most adults even, don't get enough fruits and vegetables. But the good news is fruits and vegetables are largely water. For example, broccoli is, and watermelon, for example, is something like 93 or 95% water. So incorporating plenty of fruits and vegetables is actually a tactic to help with hydration. And then also relying on other beverages and other hydrating foods. So things like smoothies or chocolate milk or even yogurt, which is largely water, is also hydrating to the body. And another strategy, because as we start to get into a little colder weather, soup becomes a great element as well to add in, because soup can be very hydrating to the body also. So along with sipping water throughout the day is incorporating a wide variety of hydrating foods and fluids. Some of those examples like I shared here on the screen. Next slide. Okay. We'll pause for a polling question.
Thanks, Molly. Okay, so our second polling question is, when should student athletes consider switching over to a sports drink? So please take a couple moments to fill that out. And Molly, I just wanted to say, while everyone's filling this out, that bringing up soup as a hydration option, I think a lot of times people do forget about that. And coming into like the fall season now, that's a great tip.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, there you go.
All right, well, there is a bunch of you that got the answer correct here, and I'll cover this here in a minute. And certainly for those of you, as I explain this, if you didn't get the answer correct, if you have any questions you want me to clarify, or kind of what your thought might have been, certainly happy to try and answer. So what to drink? Mostly water is definitely the goal, and if practices or workouts are less than 60 minutes of continuous effort, water will do the trick. When you want to switch to a sports drink, the general reference of a guideline is 60 minutes is when you want to switch to a sports drink. So the other piece to that is, if you have same day bouts of intense or continuous repeated exertion, so double sessions, especially in the heat, you may want to have your athletes switch to a sports drink for that second session, even if it's not over 60 minutes, just because of the loss of fluid and then the heat element of the heat stress. So again, if it's warm to hot or humid conditions, you could switch to a sports drink earlier, but generally the rule of thumb is only when activity is over 60 minutes is you would switch to a sports drink to replenish not only the electrolytes that come with the sports drink, but also to start to give the body some extra carbohydrates, because you burn up about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour of activity. And sports drinks are designed to start to deliver those carbohydrates back to the body to help keep endurance and energy up. Next. Okay, so what to avoid? During activity, you want to avoid fruit juices and carbonated drinks. Carbonated drinks tend to be an irritant to the system, and fruit juices, fruit sugar, fructose, is not friendly to the digestive system. Let's just leave it at that. and it can cause GI distress for athletes. So if an athlete adds a little fruit juice to their water, that would be fine, but you would want to avoid 100% fruit juice drinks during activity. And the position of the National Federation of State High School Associations is no energy drinks during or around the time of exercise. Next. So the other piece I just want to highlight here, and I love working with the American Dairy Association to promote the benefits of chocolate milk, because this is something I truly believe in as a sports dietitian. And in working with athletes and organizations that have very, very big budgets that can buy anything product wise they want, we stock refrigerators with chocolate milk for refueling because it gets the job done. It's got a carbohydrate to protein ratio that's appropriate for refueling tired muscles. It is hydrating to the body, of course, because it is a liquid, and it also has additional essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, vitamin A, B vitamins, and potassium, all which are very important for athletes, but especially things like potassium for muscles. So I just want to share that with you because it is a really affordable beverage that's perfect for refueling. Athletes, especially high school athletes, do not need to be buying specialized products or powders to refuel their bodies with. Chocolate milk will get the job done, and definitely in a more affordable way than many products that they might be looking for. And it looks like there's a couple questions coming in maybe on the timing related to sports drinks. Elizabeth or Courtney, if anybody wants me to pause to address that before I wrap up here, I could do that.
Sure. Yeah, I was trying to give clarification to the person who typed in a question. It was on the slide that was right after the polling question. And she said, or it was the polling question. It says, the question doesn't say 30 or 60 minutes after what? After their first drink, after practice, after competition. So I was clarifying that, believe you meant it was after more than 60 minutes of intense, continuous, or repeated exertion, but feel free to address that.
Nope, that is exactly what I meant. So that's typically the guideline, is it's after the athlete has been continuously exerting effort for 60 minutes or more. So if your practices are 45 minutes, for example, there wouldn't be a need to recommend a sports drink unless you were working out in extremely hot or humid conditions or had multiple sessions in a day.
Correct. And thank you to the attendee that submitted that. We will take a closer look at how we word those polling questions in the future. So thanks again.
Quick tip on monitoring. So, weight can be a tricky issue, checking weights of your athletes, but when used appropriately, it can be a really helpful tool to help monitor hydration status. Some teams go as far as having a check your weight before and after, and whether they share that number with the trainer or their coach or however you monitor that. But that can help athletes judge, how they're doing with their fluid intake. And in a perfect world, you want to minimize fluid loss based on what they consume during a practice or game. Zero fluid loss doesn't have to be the goal, but again, if you've got a 150-pound athlete, if they could lose 2 pounds or less, that would be great to really help them gauge how they're doing, because it's sometimes really hard to know if you're not checking your weight. So if that's available to you and your athletes, it can be used as a helpful tool, not to promote losing weight or anything else, but again, just monitoring fluid loss before and after workouts. Next slide. And then just to wrap up with monitoring, if you don't want to do the weight aspect, another effective monitoring tool, and I know it's a little gross to think about or talk about, but is urine color. And the goal that I always try to equate it to, because it's something most people can get in their brains, is pale lemonade color urine is the goal. So clear urine doesn't have to be the goal. And if your urine's looking something more like apple juice, that is a sign that you are underhydrated. So athletes can start to use that to gauge when they go to the bathroom And especially as they go to the bathroom in the morning, how are they doing day to day with their hydration? If they're waking up always kind of looking a little underhydrated, that's a really important cue to them that they need to be better with their daily hydration routine throughout their day. Next slide. What about energy drinks? I'm going to avoid getting on a soapbox, but I'll just be very clear. Water and sports drinks should be used for hydration. Energy drinks, and when I say energy drinks, thinking things like Red Bull, Monster, there's a million of them out there, should not be used for hydration before, during, or after activity. And absence of the benefit and potential risk should be widely shared among athletes. Energy drinks are not designed to be sports drinks and should not be used by athletes. And this is the position, again, of the National Federation of State High School Associations. And I stand 110% by this. There's really no exception of when an energy drink for a teenage athlete should be appropriate to use. So if you see athletes bringing them in, I know it can be a touchy subject, but certainly it's not something that should be recommended. It could be very dangerous to their health, and they're not designed for children. And although teenagers don't like to think of themselves as children, technically, under the age of 19 is considered children. So they're definitely not designed for use and should not be used by them. Next. So just to recap, hydration can definitely impact performance. So talking about hydration with your athletes can really help them, bridge a potential gap they might have that could really result in nice performance gains for them. A focus on hydration daily is the goal. So like we talked, not just on game days, but what are they doing, every single day throughout the week. And drinking mostly water throughout the day is certainly the goal, but again, things like soup, smoothies, chocolate milk, yogurt, fruits, vegetables can also be used to help increase hydration. The hydration routine and the guidelines I shared before, during, and after are important and can help an athlete kind of dial in, if you will, what they're doing to benefit their performance, both for workouts as well as games. You can start to implement some hydration monitoring protocols, whether it is checking weight or teaching athletes how to use urine color. And again, pale lemonade color is the goal of urine to equal hydrated. And last but not least, of course, energy drinks should not be used by athletes and not recommended at all during the time of exercise. So I believe we have another polling question to wrap up with.
Yes, thanks, Molly. Yep, the last polling question is, will hydration be something you talk about with your student athletes? After hearing Molly's wonderful presentation. And I'm just going to take a moment too while you guys are filling that out. Please feel free to type in any questions in the Q&A box below at the bottom of your screen. We'll have some time now at the end to address them. That's wonderful to see all the participants writing yes.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. And like I said, hydration, while it is a relatively seemingly simple thing, subtle shift in an athlete arriving to your workouts and practices and games hydrated can definitely get them gains in their performance, which is awesome. There are some reference papers here for you that if you want to read more into detail on any of these, kind of topics that I've shared with you today or facts that I've shared, they're all free PDFs. So you should be able to click on the links in the slide that I believe will be shared with you from registering for this and access those papers.
Correct. Yep, we'll be talking about that in a little bit. We're going to send a post-webinar e-blast in about 1 week that you'll get on the presentation as a PDF, so you'll have access to all these links and resources.
Great.
All right, next slide.
So I just want to thank you all for attending. Again, I know it's such a busy time of year. You see my email as well as some links to how to connect with me on social media, as well as my Fuel to Win website. If you have any questions and follow-up that we don't get to today or would like to reach out to me, I'd be happy to hear from you and really appreciate you taking the time to dial in and listen to this important topic.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for such a wonderful and timely presentation. Lots of great tips and valuable resources as well. So now we're going to open it up for some questions. So please, again, feel free to keep adding any questions in the Q&A box so that we can have Molly address them. And we'll start off with this one, Molly. So, and this one's kind of from me actually first as people start to type some questions in the box. So I know sometimes for high school athletes especially, you'll hear them say sometimes like, oh, I'm just not thirsty, or, you know, I don't want water. I don't like the way water tastes. It's so plain. So what tips would you have maybe for those high school student athletes that kind of resist a little bit just drinking plain water?
Yes, it's funny. I have a teenager now myself. He's headed to high school next year, so I feel like I'm in the throes of this myself sometimes right now. But one of the things I do suggest is, as much as I said, water will get the job done. Something like a Propel, which is just a little bit of electrolyte kind of powder mix. If that helps stimulate thirst and helps the athlete to drink more, that certainly could be something that's used. The other thing is to play around with the temperature of water. Sometimes athletes like water icy cold. Sometimes it tastes better to them at room temperature, or, so that sometimes can make a big difference. And then also, a little bit of the, I'll steal it from Nike, but the just do it is like, it's okay if you don't love it, but your body is 50% water. It's what you need. Like, a little bit of the just do it. And then when it becomes routine and they feel it helps their performance, it usually then will help it to stick better as a habit.
That's a great point. Yeah, totally agree. And then I guess like as a part two of that is, how would you what recommendations do you have for having student athletes kind of like remind themselves? Like I know sometimes people say like, oh, put a reminder in your phone so you don't forget, like wear like a intentions bracelet so you don't forget what your goals are. What kind of recommendations like that would you have for athletes who just forget, or just, say they don't have time, or they forget to drink to stay hydrated?
Yeah, a lot of times I try to make it quantifiable for athletes, and if they're open to wearing those, we all have them for a million different causes, those little like plastic type bracelets.
Yep.
If they put 2 on their wrist and consider it like 1 for each refill of their water bottle, and they put it on, their left hand to start the day, and when they finish a water bottle, move it to their right hand, and that they want to, swap those bracelets by the end of the day. As a reminder. I love having people set reminders in their phone, or even if they have a watch that sets the little alerts, programming once an hour, a little hydration break so that it's cueing them to make sure they're drinking their fluids. And certainly just carrying it with you throughout the day. There's nothing better, I think, than actually having water at your side, because you will mindlessly be drinking it, even if if you don't have it with you, it's real hard to get done.
That's very true. Very true. Just always carry it with you and you should be good to go, right?
It's definitely helpful.
Yeah. All right, here's another question for you, which I don't think we touched too much upon, regarding caffeinated drinks like coffee, for example. I mean, high school athletes are, doing Dunkin' runs or going to Starbucks and drinking coffee. How do those types of products affect sports performance in terms of their hydration status?
Well, if you had me do this presentation a decade ago, I would have told you caffeine is a diuretic and it's dehydrating to the body. But fast forward to what we know today, and while caffeinated beverages do slightly increase urine output, overall it still has a net effect on hydration. It is hydrating to the body. The key word, in moderation. And there is a formula to that. The general reference number, it gets a little technical, but if any of you on the phone are caffeine fans, you can use it for yourself, even if you don't want to teach your athletes per se. But 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And for most adults, that works out to be something like 400-ish milligrams of caffeine per day. Would be kind of a threshold, and that's like a large coffee or a couple small Keurig cups. So, the one thing I always recommend, especially for high school athletes, is if some is good, more is not better. So,
Good point.
having a Dunkin' beverage a day, preferably probably more of like the medium-sized Dunkin' beverage, would be fine. But, certainly excess caffeine can be dehydrating to the body. But in moderation, it can be okay.
Perfect. Thank you for that response. Yeah. And in terms of dehydration too, I know you were saying before, like, just 1 to 2% being dehydrated, it really could negatively affect your sports performance. So what might be some signs to look out for in terms of dehydration? What are some things that kids, student athletes, and coaches can kind of keep an eye out for?
Yeah, great question. Certainly a little bit of lightheadedness, dizziness, thirst, as I already mentioned, is one of typically the earliest signs. And then you also would want to look for just fatigue, and if they're starting to get cramping, that can also be a sign. And as dehydration progresses, you would start to get into the more severe signs and symptoms where you actually have a loss of sweating and other things happening. But the position papers that I did give links to also have some great references and more details on kind of recognizing dehydration in athletes. So I definitely encourage to check those out as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Molly. Great resources. It was a great presentation, really, really valuable for coaches kind of going into the sports season. It's definitely a different sports season than previous years. So whether you guys are just practicing, training, and not necessarily competing, I think this information still is very, very relevant. So especially as it carries into the winter, the spring, and, so on and so forth. So big thanks to Molly. And if we could advance to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a moment now. There are going to be a couple post-webinar polling questions. If you don't mind taking a moment to fill that out. And while you're doing that, I'm going to announce the winners, the 3 lucky winners of our raffle prize. I really wish I had a drum roll on here. All right, so we have the first winner of the raffle prize is Joe Altieri. The second winner is Jean Keohane, and I apologize if I did not say your last name correctly. The third winner of the raffle prize and last winner of the series is Jerry Duffy. So congratulations to all of our raffle prize winners. We will be connecting with you in an email after this webinar. Most likely you'll hear from us tomorrow so that we can set up the details of how you can receive that raffle prize. So stay tuned for that. And then I also wanted to let everyone know that we will be sending a post-webinar e-blast to you all, which will include the slide deck, an on-demand webinar, the recording link, of the webinar, as well as a handout and some resources. So please keep an eye out from that too. That'll be coming from us here at American Dairy next week. So stay tuned for that. And again, I just want to, in closing, say thank you all for attending today's webinar and all of the webinars we had in this series. I know we've had several repeat attendees, so thank you for that and that support. We really want to make sure we're providing you all with relevant content that you can then turn around to your student athletes and enhance their sports performance. So thanks again. We look forward to connecting with you all throughout the year. Thanks again, Molly, for your valuable information and expertise.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. All right. Stay safe, everyone.